Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fresh Perspectives podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Lauren, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Have you ever been in the middle of a project or a journey, one that you actively chose to do, something you were really excited about, and got to a point where you feel like, why is this so awful? Did I make a mistake in embarking on this journey? Should I just quit now? This is something that is so common and something that Michelle and I actually talked about in last week's episode. I call this the pit of despair. If we think about our lives and our journeys that we embark on as part of a hero's journey, there's a moment in every arc where the initial excitement has worn off. You're deep into the work, into the slog, into the repetitive everyday, and it is so much harder than you thought. You can't see the finish line, but you also are too far from the starting line and too invested to want to give up. In that episode last week, I referenced an infographic that I saw, I think about 10 years ago, and I will post it on social so that you can see it as well. But it basically outlines the journey. So when you start a project, you're super excited, you're jazzed about it, you're thinking about what the end goal looks like, and then you embark on the journey of starting. And at first, it'll be exciting and there's a lot going on. But eventually, you will reach a point where things get hard. And maybe the journey is nothing like you thought it would be. And maybe you even think that you're not capable of accomplishing the end goal. But what I love about this infographic is it's literally a start, a dip, and then actually a little bit higher than where you started before. Knowing about the pit of despair has changed how I've taken on any task and any journey. Because I now know that anything worthwhile is going to have a pit of despair. And anticipating that has made it that much easier to name what I'm feeling and what's going on, and to recognize that it is merely a step. It does not mean that I'm going to fail at accomplishing the end goal. It does not mean that I was crazy for taking on the task in general. It's just a natural part of any process. I first found this infographic, I think through Google. I remember feeling really frustrated. I was working on a project at work, and I want to say it was like midnight in the office. We were working on a really big project, and I was like, man, this is brutal. This kind of sucks. In my head, when I was asked to work on the project, I was like, amazing. This is an amazing opportunity. I'm going to meet so many people. But then there comes a point of doing the work, and you just have to do the work. And in this project in particular, working with a group of people, we thought that we came to the greatest version of the project, and then we'd meet with somebody else and they would poke holes in it. And then we would spiral and be like, oh my gosh, we're back to square one. Or even worse, all of the work that we've just spent time doing isn't worthwhile, isn't going to actually show up in our final project. Most people quit in the pit of despair. We lose a lot of people in that pit of despair. Yes, we do. Because they misread this as a signal. They are thinking that this discomfort is telling them that they've done something wrong. And again, it's that feeling of what the heck have I gotten myself into? But I want to change your perspective on that, because I think that reaching the pit of despair shows up because you're doing something that is real, something with stakes. Easy things don't have pits of despair. Things we've done before, processes and journeys and projects that we've embarked on before, we don't have those pits because we've gone through them before and we know how to get through them. The pit is actually evidence of your ambition and of the fact that you're doing something that is net new for you. And I want to reference something Michelle said in last week's episode. She really talked about sitting in the discomfort. And this is something that I learned about in my psychology classes, that I hear reiterated in therapy. sitting in those feelings of, ugh, I can't believe what I've done. I'm so out of my comfort zone. This almost feels hopeless. I've definitely had that feeling of feeling hopeless at times. And again, that frustration of all of the work that I've done is just going to waste. But the work that you do for any project, any goal, never goes to waste. I'm going to call upon running here. I was training for a race and I spent a lot of time every weekend, every weekday, logging miles and going hard. And when the race came, I didn't do as well as I wanted to. And I could have written that off as a failure. I could have said, I'm never going to run again. This sucks. Wasted all that time. But it wasn't wasted because each iteration of a race, every time you step on that starting line, you're approaching it with more knowledge and information than you had previously. I saw something this morning that said successful people don't fail. Successful people fail and keep going. And you use that frustration as feedback for the next iteration of the journey that you embark on. So you're in the pit of despair. Maybe you're in the pit of despair right now. What are some practical tips on how you can speak to yourself when you're feeling these very recognizable, very relatable feelings? The first is naming it. First of all, the pit of despair just sounds funny. I love telling people when I'm working on a project, oh man, I'm in the pit of despair. It is a bit comical. I really, see that valley. I see myself in it. And naming it removes some of the power of the pit. It stops making me feel like a victim of the situation. And instead, it feels like a weather pattern. It feels like, okay, I've known this weather pattern before. I know that the storm comes and then the accomplishment comes after. And sometimes you don't even know how you're going to get out of the pit. I was working on a super fast turn project a few weeks ago, and I remember I think I was 2 hours into it, and I maybe worked for a total of 6 to 8 hours on it. I was 2 hours into it, and I was like, "Oh my god, I do not think I can do this. I don't even have the semblance of a clue of how I'm gonna get to the output." And I reminded myself of the pit of despair. I'm like, "Okay, 2 hours in, I've reached the pit." And the pit can be many days in, many weeks in, or it could be hours or minutes in. It depends on, the process that you're embarking on. Once I named it and said, Rachel, you are in the pit of despair, I was like, okay, now I can focus on getting out and getting to my end goal. The second thing that you can tell yourself when you're in the pit of despair is that you can lower the bar without abandoning the goal. And lowering the bar sounds really negative. But when Michelle and I talked last week, we talked a lot about consistency. And consistency is not 100% every day. Some days it is simply showing up. So if you committed to running a race, I guarantee you're going to wake up some mornings and be like, I don't want to run. I woke up this morning, I had a leg day on the calendar. I didn't want to do it. Literally walked to the gym. I didn't want to do it. I looked at those 35-pound weights. I was like, I don't want to pick them up. But I told myself, what if you just tried? It's totally okay if you pick up these weights and you can't do what you did last week, but I need you to just try. You can kind of become that coach in your own head. And I find that speaking to yourself in the second person can really help. So saying things like, I want you to just try. I want you to just do 10 minutes of this a day. I want you to just open your laptop and start writing, start typing, start creating, whatever it is. And the last piece of advice for the pit of despair and getting through it is finding somebody who's been through it. Michelle was so transparent and so open about her IVF journey. And I think it's so important when you're going through something you've never gone before, when you feel that pit of despair coming on. And after this episode, knowing that that pit's coming, you can even start to find these people before you reach that point, is just talking to people who've been through the process. If you're going to run a marathon, talk to people that have run it before. Try to understand what they've learned from their failures, from their mistakes, from their pits of despair to make your pit of despair a little more bearable. I will leave you with this. The pit of despair does not mean you're failing. It doesn't mean that you should give up on the task. It doesn't mean that you were wrong for having this ambition. It means you're in that messy middle. And the middle is where the work happens. The frustration leads to amazing outputs. Nobody likes to talk about the middle. Everybody likes to tell you about where they were when they started and where they are now when they finished. People especially love talking about the finishing and the accomplishing. But the middle is something that everyone goes to. And the pit is where you actually become that stronger, more capable version of yourself. If you are in that pit of despair right now, I want you to know that you are not incapable and you didn't make the wrong choice to embark on this journey. You're just in that part that doesn't have a highlight reel, and you need to keep going because there are amazing things on the other side, and so many people are going to be able to be inspired and learn from your journey. This has been another episode of the Fresh Perspectives podcast. I hope you found this helpful. Like I said, I'm going to post the visual on my Instagram account. And I hope that when you're going through something next time, you think about the pit of despair and you have a little laugh to yourself and you tell yourself, this is totally normal and I will get through it. I hope you have a great week and I can't wait to speak with you soon.